We're starting up. I want to welcome everybody just taking part in this series. My name is John Ristakis. I am moderating this series of 10 lectures on Rojava. This series is being co-sponsored by Synergia Cooperative Institute, of which I am a co-founder, by the Global University for Sustainability and the Center for Civil Diplomacy in Rojava. The series is part of the Global University's 2023 South-South Dialogue on Sustainability. It is titled Rojava, Resistance, Resilience, and Renewal, Democratic Confederalism and the Changing Face of Revolution. This is the third in a series of 10 lectures. This particular lecture is titled The Democratic Nation, the Role of Pluralism and the Inclusion of Ethnic and Religious Groups in the Political System of the Region. Our guest lecturer today is Fawza Yousef. She is one of the founders of the women's movement. She's worked on establishing the Democratic Society movement and is now a member of the executive body of the Democratic Union Party, the PYD, and she's the author of Why Genealogy. Our respondent today is Debbie Bookchin. She is a journalist, an author, and editor of several newly updated AK press books by her father, Murray Bookchin, who has been a profound influence on the philosophy and practice of democratic confederalism in Rojava. Debbie is also the co-editor of his municipalism book, The Next Revolution. The way the lecture will work is our presenter, Fawza, will be speaking for about an hour. And then we will be receiving a thoughtful and insightful and astute response from our guest respondent, Debbie Bookchin, for about 20 minutes, responding and reflecting on the matters that have been introduced to us by Fawza. And then we will have an open dialogue session from webinar participants for the remainder of the time. The entire program will be about 2 hours in length. So we are also very, very fortunate to have a couple of simultaneous interpreters with us who will be interpreting in Kurdish and English. So welcome, everybody. We're about to start. Please select the language you wish to listen to on the little global symbol at the bottom of your screen on the right there. Select the language you want to listen into. And I think we're on our way. So my dear friend and colleagues, Fawza, you may begin whenever you wish, and we're listening.
Thank you. I also would like to welcome everyone here. And I think I always find this kind of discussions very important because we need these kind of discussions, both to exchange ideas, but also to share and discuss our experience that we are running here. At the beginning, I would like to start with this. We are today, we attended a funeral, a ceremony for the martyrs. Once again, Turkish state targeted our women, our revolutionary women, and 2 women has fallen. And these 2 women, they have been involved in this revolution from the beginning. They put a great effort in this revolution. They were revolutionary women, and Turkish state targeted them with drones, and both they lost their lives as a result of this attack. So on this occasion, I would like to salute all the martyrs, and once again I would like to repeat our promise for victory and for struggle. And I would like to speak now about nation states. And then after that, I will continue. Why we are defending democratic nation against nation states? We can say in our region, in the Middle East, after the First World War, our area was divided and it was redesigned based on the nation states. And the newly emerged nation states were not founded on demand or on the because of the needs of the people living in the area. It was a politics represented by the Brits and France, and they had their plan, and they divided the region, and they founded new nation states. And these states, during the last century, they had a great war against the people in the region, because nation states are based on very centralized systems and also a system of security and oppression. And the leaders of these states, they were all collaborators, because those who were assigned or elected as presidents were also collaborators with these great powers who had divided the region, and they were at their service, and they were planning how they can steal from their own people, how they can loot the area and the national sources, and they were sacrificing the benefits, interests of the people at the service of the rich classes and also these international powers. That's how they functioned. And these states in the 20th century, they were dominant in the entire city, and the people in the people in the Middle East, they were oppressed by nation states and also the domination of these powers. And all these, we witnessed the most backwarded, extremist, and fascist states in the region. They were very strictly centralized and based on monism, like one language, one nation, and not respecting or not allowing any other diversity to survive or represent themselves. These systems were the reason. Also, they brought lots of massacres with themselves. There were physical massacres in the 20th century. The Kurds were massacred, Assyrians, Syriacs, Armenians, and many other peoples in the region. They were subjected to massacres. And we can say it was a century of torture for the people in the Middle East. It was a brutal century, not only for the Kurds, but for all the other peoples living in the region. And the politics, it was also a politics of inciting hatred against people. All these nation states and the hegemonic powers, they had such politics that they were trying to create always disputes, conflicts among the peoples living in the area. The ideology of nation state, which was based on the power of the hegemonic powers, it became like a poison against the coexistence or living together. We have sexism, nationalism, religionism, positivism. These four ideologies, they created a mess in the Middle East. We can say in this century, as a result of nationalism, peoples were completely destroyed, and there were the demography changes took place, So when you compare the situation at the beginning of the 20th century and today, the demography completely has changed. The Kurdish regions became Arabic. Armenian regions, now it's occupied by the Turks. Or in the regions where multilingualism existed, now it's only monolingual. So the languages have been killed. Our Assyrian Syriac people, currently, the number of the people who can actually speak the language is very limited. It is an ancient culture, belong to this area. Same thing happened to the Armenians. The Armenian language is now only used as an official language in Armenia, Republic of Armenia. And the Kurdish language, it's still banned in Turkey, in Iran. It's not allowed to use it in official matters or affairs. And in Rojava, Kurdistan, until 2011, this language was forbidden, and these languages were left underdeveloped. They were all prevented developing themselves, thriving. They were not allowed to do. So it also affected very seriously on the culture. So one sovereignty of a group of people in a state, they all control, they have all the power under their control, and they dominate the society, they oppress and repress the society. And this was very concrete, very obvious in the Middle East. And nation state, through its organs like judiciary or the legislations, they repressed people and they denied their languages and confessions, everything. And in terms of confession, religions, we also had another massacre here. For example, Yezidis. They were subjected to 75 different genocides. They have been massacred for 75 times in the region just because they were non-Muslims and non-Christians, because they were not Abrahamic religions. So they have always been targeted in the region. And so when we take all these into consideration, leader Öcalan, who is also at the same time, he's also a sociologist, Abdullah Öcalan, after he was captured and put in the prison, he had a great dramatic change in his paradigm. He focused on the domination and power relations in the state and in the society, and he was thinking ways to bring freedom to the Kurdish society, and what will be the alternative, what will be the solution. That was his focus. That's how he spent his time in the prison. In 2005, he came out with this change of paradigm. It was based on this fact: the states and power they don't bring freedom. They in We had a misunderstanding. The freedom of the people was always connected to an existing a state. In order to make the people free, then we had to found a state for these people. That was a misconception, but that was the thing that was a dominant idea in the 20th century. But freedom and power were always connected to each other. Power means the nation state here, but Öcalan brought a change in this approach. Actually, freedom and power of a state are they are contradictory, because nation states brings restrictions, brings control. There will be the ones in power, there will be and then those who are under control. There are subjects and they are the objects in this relationship with state. So that's this contradiction. Either there will be lords and the slaves, or there are the polarizing society, like the man and woman, or the ones in charge, the ones under control, or the one. It's always bringing these contradictions between two different groups and always deepening the conflict. So his conclusion was the states, nation states, do not bring freedom. Nation states are like great prisons for the peoples, for the diversities. And in the Middle East, we have witnessed this. It has become a region of borders. In 20th century, among for all the peoples living in those states, it became a prison, and the ones who are in power, they were like the guardians for all these peoples. And that's why we call it the century of torture. The society was under constant repression and torture. And I'm saying it's not only because of Kurds. Everybody suffered this situation because the Kurds, they were stateless, but it's not only Kurds, like Armenians, Assyrians, Syriacs, and all the different ethnic groups in living within these states, they suffered a lot. And not only these people, but also the Turks themselves, Arabs, or the Persians, despite the fact that they had a nation state, they also suffered under this this system. They were also deprived of their democratic rights. They were also oppressed. They suffered military governments, fascist governments. They suffered under martial laws, military coups. So they didn't also enjoy democratic states or democratic governments. They also suffered like all the other stateless peoples. That's how Öcalan describes it. They put on the robe of the crazy persons. It was like they made us wear this robe of the crazy people. So we were so focused. We were all um, obsessed about founding a state. And we were always fighting against and then we had to fight against all these states of these oppressive regimes. And then that's how the humanity spent the 20th century, with wars and conflicts and killings and bloodshed. So nation states do not recognize any chance for the other identities to survive. It's based on one certain identity. If you don't fit in that description, then you don't have right to live. So in Syria, we were oppressed, and they were imposing like Arabic identity. We were described as Arabs. In addition to that, it was also there were so many people who were also stateless. They were not given any identity cards. So even the Arabic identity was presented as something luxury that no everybody is not entitled to have it. So we suffered a lot. There were a great number of people in Europe. You see, even the pets, the animals, they have an identity paper, but these people living in Syria, they were not given any identity, any papers, and not even the Arab, they were not even the national citizens of this state, and they were discriminated. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't benefit from the health services. The similar situations we have seen in Iraq, in Turkey. We remember Saddam's time, Anfal operations, massacres, Halabja, and in Turkey, since 1925, the Kurds have always been constantly massacred. So we can emphasize that leader Öcalan was dealing with this wound that we were suffering. It is a wound of the Middle East, because the problem I'm talking about is not only the problem of the Middle East, it is wider. It is the most painful model. We saw the most interesting, more painful version of nation states in the Middle East. Now, but we see the Europeans, they are like moving forward. They have now European Union. They lifted up the borders among themselves, and they are moving forward. So we, in this regard, we should also see the changes in different countries. But in the Middle East, this system of nation state didn't evolve. It is like they were it was like a swamp that we stuck in it in the Middle East. And the reason is that the history of states in the Middle East goes back to thousands of years. Or the first states, they appeared in the Middle East, and the hierarchy also is very strong in the Middle East. The nations, the peoples in the Middle East are also very deepened. In the Middle East, also confession, religion, and nationalism, they always have been used and abused by the hegemonic powers, and it's also promoted religionism and nationalism. In our area, nation states always brought tragedies to the people. Therefore, leader Öcalan, in after changing his paradigm, he had a very profound change. He brought a very profound change in his paradigm, and he focused on a democratic nation as an alternative to the nation states. So what is the democratic nation? When we may have a comparison between democratic nation and the nation states. At the beginning, the democratic nation, these four ideologies which the nation states are based on, it rejects them. Democratic nation, nation states are based on nationalism, and democratic nation bases itself on this multiculturalism, diversities, and recognize all the different identities, ethnic and national identities. Nation states are based on religionism, confessionalism, but democratic nation recognizes the diversity of religions and confessions, and also it believes in the coexistence of different religious groups together, a peaceful life. And nation states, they based on a very strong power. Democratic nation is based on the democratic authority, which is in the hands of the people, and it designs itself on the local administrations, autonomous administrations on the local levels. Nation states uses like the ethnic cleansing or destruction of their identities. But democratic nations recognize very different identities, and they don't see them as a threat. So and it's not only one identity. So everybody can have different identities, and all these identities can coexist, and they are all recognized. Like, so against one society, one language, we have multi-languages and multi-societies. And the main principle is freedom, and freedom in every field. It's not only about the individual freedoms. In addition to that, it's also recognize and support these collective freedoms. So we can also say it is like an equality among the non-equals. This is also the radical democracy is also one of the methods. It is a democracy among all different identities, all different components of the society. It's not based on the numerical minority or majority. It rejects these concepts, because there are some nations, some peoples, their numbers are very limited. So if we adopt a system based on the numerical quantity, then that will be very unfair on these people who are little or inferior in terms of numbers. So this is a radical democracy that accepting all the existing identities, doesn't matter if they are less or more in numbers, they have an equal position, equal status. And we can also say mentality of democratic nation is based on it's a social society, politicized, and a moral society that's like a democratic authority can also open the ways for the society, instead of restricting them, limiting them, or looting them, or stealing from them. It's going to be a part of the society itself. This authority is not out of the or above the society, it is within the society. This is the principle that democratic nation is based upon. It is a system, it's a new one as well. Of course, there are different ways, and in his defense at the court, Abdullah Öcalan wrote it very thoroughly, the principles of this democratic society. Now I will focus on the theory, and then I will give you some concrete examples from Rojava, how we implement this theory. So you can also have a better understanding of the system and the implementation. There are 9 principles of this democratic nation, according to the theory developed by the sociologist Abdullah Öcalan. Is one of them. Democratic nation, free individuals and communal life. Individual freedom who have their will, it's very important for a political or politicized society. Today, when we look at the power systems, like the capitalist modernity, we see that the balance between individuals and the society is destroyed by the capitalist modernity. The individuals are so they became so big, they became enormous, that they actually weaken the society and social structure. So if you only develop the individuals, and then they will also get alienated, they will also get distant from the social values, and eventually they can become like savages. Or this emotional intelligence and analytical intelligence it regress, and then so we need analytical logic. It has to be the path. But if this analytical logic is not controlled by the morals and moral values, then eventually these individuals becomes the center of everything, and society, or being society, or socialization gets destroyed. So this is one of the main principles. Individuals, citizens, every citizen, they should have their individual freedoms and rights. It is very clear. It's concrete. You have to protect their individual rights and freedoms. But they should also have a very strong connection with the society. And you can make it happen through the communal life. That small society, in a society in which the individuals can grow and get powerful or develop, they need the society. Humans are social beings. You cannot separate them from the societies, because we also get our very human or humane features from the society. It's important to be in a society in order to be a human being. So there should be have a define the relationship between the individuals and the society, because we cannot divide them. Individuals, they mostly, it is a danger if the individuals who are ignoring the society is a danger, but it's also a danger if the society ignores the individual rights and freedoms. So there should be a balance. If free individuals who have their wills can present themselves better in a society, in a politicized and a moral society, a society based on values. So an individual can actually thrive within such a society, because an individual who gets far away from the society cannot have these values, and it's also dismantle like the morals, like the aesthetics. These moral values, they will lose them when they are when they remain distant from the society. So that's the thing that we see, that's the capitalist system like a monster that we see. It cuts the ties of the individuals from the social morals, and individuals and an individual raised based on these moral values and with political values, and also educated and aware, can be a very good member of the society, and also get the chance to to develop and thrive himself, herself in the society. The communal life, and we are talking about the communal life. There can be the different communes within the society, and one individual can be a part of different communes, but everybody needs to be a part of a commune. It is also one of the fundamental principles of Leader Öcalan, in which he mentioned in his defense at the court. Second one is it's the administration, government. Governance is very important because when we talk about administration or government, we are not talking about the power that what we see today in this states, in these countries. We are talking about self-administration, self-governance, and it is important for every people and every society. As oppressed societies, what these the powers, what the nation states, what they do, they leave these oppressed people without representation, without any governments. They are always being governed by the central states, and the society eventually remains deprived of the right to discuss its own matters. They will not even be capable of to discuss their affairs and topics related to them, because their entire life is administrated by someone from outside. So when you look at the Kurdish society, we have the best example here. Kurdish society is like a society without a head. So if I need to give you some examples, maybe a rough example, but it's important. The societies without self-governance, it's like a torso without a head, because without a head, it doesn't have any will, it doesn't have any capabilities, because without a head, you cannot control other parts of your body. So if people, those people will perish at the end unless they are given the chance or right to self-defense, because a society which is governed or administrated by a different head then also abuse this society. So the heads will be everything, but the body, which is the society, will be nothing at the end. So it's important to have your self-governance, self-administration. When we say we are against power and the nation states, and there will be a chaos, no, that's not what we are talking. We are not talking about a chaos here. We are talking about giving the power and the governance in the hands of the society. Let the society organize themselves, not that someone else will impose a system, a structure from top to bottom. Direct democracy is important to make the will of this society to be heard. That they should have the will to change the power or the government, and the government should only assume the role of coordination. It will only coordinate the communes and the society, and the communes and society will make the decisions. The role of the state, the role of the government should be limited to the coordination of different societies, so that we can have democratic pillars for the self-governance. And by the because if we only adopt as very small miniature system of central states on the regional level, eventually they will end up like the oppressive states. So we cannot copy or have a very minimal example of the existing systems. That this is the alternative to against the existing systems. And in Northeast Syria, what we call self-governance, self-administration, with participation of all different ethnicities and religious groups, and it is based on a social consensus. And this self-administration is there in order to enable facilitate the life of the society, not impose things on them or restrict them. There will not be a domination on the people or bring everything under its on the society. So the role of the self-administration in North and Eastern Syria is just a coordination, because all the decisions are met by the councils, whose members are also members of the society. In the past, maybe direct democracy was kind of difficult, but now, thanks to the technology, we can have referendums every day. So as long as the government have this democratic mentality, they can go back to the people and ask them. Now we have the technological means for that. As it's very important. The methods and the mentality, uh, democratic mentality and the methods are very important for this administration. And the third principle is its social coexistence. It is one of the main pillars. We see that there is a chaos, or there's a chaos within the society, and it comes from capitalist modernity, because capitalist modernity, in order to create cheap working power, energy workers, they leave the society backwarded, underdeveloped, and poor. This is all on purpose. So these people, we can see that this capitalist modernity has become a cancer for the humanity. There is also injustice among, and there is this army of the poor. There are army of the uneducated people. Look at the numbers of the children coming to this world every year, and no plans for the future or for the woman. We see the situation of women. The woman in entire world, women are considered to be like the factory of children. They just produce children. That's it. It is, and the women are, and women's bodies are being used and abused for this system. And we can say within the society, the worst situation within the society is the woman's situation. And health is another catastrophic matter in our today's world. Look at our region. There are so many diseases that are being spread, and there are many others, like the COVID is one of them. It's all because of the health system, because of a lack of a proper health system. We suffer a lot because of these different diseases. Education is another topic. The education system in this world, it is very problematic, and not only education, but it's also science, because science is also suffering a big crisis. Science is not at the service of the society and at the service of the humanity, but it is only at the service of capitalists and the rich. Today, we look at it, the most expensive thing in this world is science, knowledge. So in our world, this education system is also going through a a crisis. Universities, for example, it is not, universities are not a center of knowledge or science. They only go there in order to get a degree, to be able to get a job afterwards. It's not for production of science or knowledge. Even the curriculums that they use in the education system, they're also only based on this purpose. The people who study, who graduate, they are not scientists, they don't understand the society, they don't really understand the science, or they don't have any ideas about the society, freedom of society, nothing of them. They only want to make money. Those who even studied medicine, they want to be rich. So engineers, they study that department in order to make more money afterwards. So it's all based on money and making more money for the individuals. The education, it brings they teach nationalism, sexism, fascism to the children, or the extremism. You look at the children every day at the schools in at schools in California. We see that mass shootings. There are so many different examples. At some universities, uh, killed his lecturer at university. So the things that happening in the schools, it's also alarming. It also shows that there is something wrong with with the educational system. There are so many a high rate of suicide among the students. Why? Why? Because this crisis, the crisis of the science, it's a fundamental crisis because when a soul, a spirit, goes through a crisis and depressed, it will also affect every part of the life. So that's therefore social life is very important. So we need to reorganize our social life. It is important. We have to do it on a different approach, giving priority to the freedom of the people, how the people can organize themselves. Like it's when they're not talking about, you know, without plan or without any goal. No, we need to find the give a meaning to the society. So we need to find out what we need in the society, because the society itself is alienated from its own true values. So these are the main principles. So education, health, population, these are or needs to be reorganized, redefined, and there will be they should be organized on a free perspective. Another
Fawza, you
principle.
have, we're having about 7 or 8 more minutes. So
Yani başım.
Okay. Another principle is it's the law. When we look at the legal system in the world, it is a it's a big problem. We see injustice everywhere. The law is now distant. It was the law is alienated. Law doesn't. It's not based on morals anymore. Now we only have like Hammurabi laws. That is like the ones that at the beginning of the history, uh, like the legislations written on the tablets at the beginning of the um, civilization. Law is not based on moral values anymore. You cannot govern a society just based on the legislations. You need moral, you need ethics, and you need a legal system based on the moral values. A law based on moral morals and aesthetics. There should be the, the, the relationship between morals, ethics, and the law, which used to exist. We have to restore it. And culture, another principle is the culture. Now we witness the culture that we witness today. Now, in terms of culture, the society is under a bombardment. For example, art is alienated from its fundaments. We see the art, it's also based on money, and it is when we when we listen to the songs, we see that the lyrics are meaningless. Or when we look at all the theater or cinema, you see all these cultural products. They are like meaningless. They are like they have to be. We see that this cultural heritage is now being it's not continue. It's becoming very meaningless, and it's only based on uh, populism and money. And also, in addition to the art, history is also is another part that has been destroyed. We Kurds, you cannot find us in the history books. We are more than 40 million, but you cannot find Kurdish name or Kurds in the Turkish history books or the Arab history books or Iranian history books. Even if they mention us, they write lies about us, or they just disseminate wrong and false information about us. So it's important to focus on art and culture. This is one of the principles of the democratic nation. And another principle is self-defense. It's a very central pillar. It's a very central principle, because all the oppressed people have always remained unprotected. They say, well, they say the state or the security forces are going to protect you. But you see, when there's a contradiction or a conflict between the society and the state doesn't protect us. In contrary, they kill us. If there is a contradiction, if there is a problem, the state and those security forces, which were supposed to be protecting us, they target us and they kill us. And we have seen it at the time of ISIS. All the states, all the armies, they run away. They escaped and they left the society undefended, unprotected. So we had to protect ourselves. If we didn't have our own self-defense forces, no state would protect us. So we cannot entrust the matter of self-defense in the hands of a state. We have to also have our say in that, and we have to organize ourselves. Another thing, diplomacy and international diplomacy. It's also important, but we know that the Kurds have always been the victims of the international diplomacy. Upcoming weeks, there will be the 100th anniversary of Lausanne Treaty. There will be a conference. Italians, the Brits, and the French, and some other countries. So 100 years ago, all these powers, hegemonic powers in Europe, they gathered on a table and they decided about our fate. It was these hegemonic powers and the nation states. They have this international diplomacy, and we Kurds, we always been sacrificed. So we don't accept this diplomacy. We don't want this official diplomacy among the states. No, we are talking about the diplomacy about people, diplomacy of peoples and civil diplomacy, diplomacy among the civil societies, because diplomacy is always considered to be a function of a state. No, we need diplomacy beyond states. We need diplomacy. We have to redefine and reorganize the diplomacy. It will be diplomacy of democratic nation. It will be diplomacy of the society, diplomacy among the oppressed people, diplomacy diplomacy among the progressive powers in the society. So we need to break that circle that imposed on us by the state. We have to go beyond those borders. So as a general definition, there was a very roughly talking about the principles. And I think at the Q&A, maybe I can give you more examples from Rojava. And once again, thank you very much for your patience and for listening to me. These are the things I can say for now, and I hope they were kind of they were understood well enough through the examples.
Thank you so much, Fawza. There's so much material in what you said. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of reflection and a lot of response from our participants. Let me invite now, and I'm sure some of the questions will help to further elucidate some of the points that you raised in your talk. Thank you. So Debbie, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to the Diplomacy Center, the Civil Diplomacy Center, for the honor of being with all of you today, and also to all the people who are tuning in, and especially, of course, to Havala Fawza for your superb and brilliant presentation. And I wish we had several hours to be doing all of this together. I think that your talk today is especially important at a time when we are seeing ethnic divisions being exploited by nation states as never before. You know, all around the world, we see ethnic divisions basically being promoted and then used by political leaders as a way of centralizing power and solidifying their holds, especially among these authoritarian personalities who are taking power in nation states all around the world right now. And I think, you know, and in the process, completely destroying and diminishing our civil liberties. And I think that, as you have so eloquently pointed out, Rojava offers us a true living, breathing example of how people from many different ethnic and religious backgrounds can live together harmoniously. It's really a model, not only for the Middle East, but for the entire world. I think that, as you have shown, that the basic foundation and the reason for this success is, in fact, the democratic confederalist model, which is an essential counterpower to the state, the nation state, which by its very nature not only undergirds capitalism and sort of exploitation with its whole monopoly on violence, but also promotes homogeneity and the glorification, as you have said so eloquently, of one people, one flag, one nation. So democratic confederalism is truly the antithesis to this, and allows us to have healthy multicultural communities that provide us with the beauty and wonder of a great, vast, diverse humanity. And there were a couple of things that you mentioned in particular when you were discussing some of the principles of democratic confederalism. And I wanted to kind of comment on a couple of those things. And then I thought I would also ask you some questions because I think there's a lot more that to accomplish in a dialogue than just me speaking. So the first thing is, you talked about free individuals and a common life, and I think that and the need to sort of balance the sense of the rights of the individual with the rights or the importance of the community. And I think that one of the things that is very interesting about that is that it very much mirrors a kind of ecological view of society and of the world. We see all the time that those ecosystems that are the most stable are the ones that are the most diverse. And under capitalist modernity, we are taught to think that the individual has to rely totally on him or herself for survival, when in fact, of course, human beings take years and years and years to develop. A baby cannot rely on itself. And likewise, our communities are so much stronger when we practice mutual aid, when we practice cooperation, when we mimic the qualities of symbiosis in nature. And I think so that it's very interesting and not at all surprising, therefore, that in Rojava, ecological or social ecology or ecological stability and harmony is also one of the fundamental guiding principles, along with, of course, women's liberation and direct democracy. So I think that you pointing that out is very important, that we have really in capitalist modernity completely lost this sense of balance between the individual and the community, and have completely, in a sense, abandoned the importance, but also the richness of how we engage when we engage together in community, and the beauty of not only the many different ethnic cultures, but just the beauty of that form of being able to associate with each other, and the fact that we can do that, and also engage in the process of self-governance as a very essential component of that process is very exciting. And I think so it's very wonderful to see how much Rojava really has been able to do this. So, and very educational for all the rest of us. And another thing that you discussed, which I think is very interesting and is often misunderstood by people outside of Rojava, is the function of government's role as being limited to coordination. And people often, when we talk about self-governance in the West here, people often say, well, but average people, they don't have the ability to understand the nuances of technical things and to be able to, how can people make policy if they don't understand, for example, how you put together a water treatment plant or some aspect of the many aspects that are necessary to have a society function. And I think that your comment and your observation about the fact that coordination and also technical expertise is really something that can be separated from policy making is very, very important, that people are able to get together, be together in their communities, talk, engage in debate, and make decisions about the goals for their communities without necessarily having the technical expertise to implement them, and also without having to worry about coordination, because coordination occurs during the process of confederalism, and there are structures in place that allow individual communities to coordinate with each other. And one of the things, again, that Rojava shows is that that coordination can happen on a very grand scale. And that even across an entire region that is thousands of miles long, it's possible for communities to delegate their decision makers to go up to each next level and to coordinate, but that they still report back to the local assemblies, back to the local communities, so that those wishes are always present, even on a regional level. And, you know, one of the things that you mentioned in your talk was about referenda. And I was interested in hearing what you might have to say. I have a lot of things, of course, that I'm interested in hearing you comment on. But, you know, one of the things that, of course, was deeply important for Mr. Öcalan, and which has been, I think, also echoed in some of the writings of my father, is the deep importance of education and the role that education plays in terms of really helping people to develop sort of what you talked about as a kind of ethics and a morality, a kind of character development that occurs when people meet face to face in assemblies and actually have the chance to debate and to see each other as neighbors. They meet as friends, they meet as part of the community. And there is a big push, I think, often outside of Rojava, where there's a huge emphasis often on technology. There's been a big push for people to decide everything just by taking a look at, you know, say a question on their computer and voting yes or no. And I'd be interested to hear, among other things, sort of how important you think it is for people to meet together on a face-to-face basis. So that is definitely one thing that I'd like to talk about. And then the other thing is that you talked, for example, about the high rate of suicides and the way that people feel so really disconnected right now socially. So I think that speaks to that. And the United States now suicide is just skyrocketing among not only college students, but, you know, teenagers, young people who are not even teenagers yet are killing themselves. And I think it is very much also a reflection of how disconnected people have become from the societies that we are told somehow are the only societies that we can live in. So that's, I think, was a very important also and poignant point that you made. So I guess, you know, let me ask a couple of questions directly to you, if I may. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the Rojava social contract. The social contract of Rojava is, in my view, just one of the most beautiful documents written in human history. And for those who have not ever read it, I highly urge you to find it, to seek it out. It's available anywhere online. And I'd just like to quote for a moment from the preamble, because it really speaks to this whole issue of ethnic inclusivity and its importance. So if you'll bear with me for a couple of minutes, the social contract dated 19th of January, 2014, opens like this. We, the people of the democratic autonomous regions of Afrin, Jazeera, and Kobani, a confederation of Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Arameans, Turkmen, Armenians, and Chechens freely and solemnly declare and establish this charter, which has been drafted according to the principles of democratic autonomy in pursuit of freedom, justice, dignity, and democracy, and led by principles of equality and environmental sustainability. The Charter proclaims a new social contract based upon mutual and peaceful coexistence and understanding between all strands of society. It protects fundamental human rights and liberties and reaffirms the people's right to self-determination. Under the Charter, we, the people of the autonomous regions, unite in the spirit of reconciliation, pluralism, and democratic participation so that all may express themselves freely in public life, in building a society free of authoritarianism, militarism, centralism, and the intervention of religious authority in public affairs. The Charter recognizes Syria's territorial integrity and aspires to maintain domestic and international peace. And then, of course, that social contract after that beautiful opening, which continues, it goes on to list 96 different articles that solidify these liberties, including placing authority within the purview of governing councils elected by popular vote, and naming the people as the sole source of legitimacy. It preserves full and equal rights for women, especially over their own bodies, something that is being eroded everywhere else in the world, and political rights to youth and to minorities. And I could go on, including, it basically also ascribes to the United Nations Conventions on Human Rights. So all of these things, I mean, it's just an extraordinary document. And one of the things that I thought I would start by asking you is sort of what is the status? I understand that the social contract is in the process or has been being rewritten. And I'm curious about why and how it might be changed, and just what is happening there as a kind of an update on that in terms of the current status of it right now.
Debbie, thank you so much for your response. Shall we continue with Fawza responding to your question, or did you have more to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a couple of other questions. I thought it might be, if it's okay, if Fawza could respond now, and then I'll ask a couple more, and then maybe we can open it up for broader discussion as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Debbie. Okay, Fawza, would you like to respond to Debbie's first question?
Sure. Thank you very much, Debbie, for your speech and also for your commentaries and nice words. The answer to your question, how it's important for the people to come face to face, what kind of influence and effect it has. It's very important because the more we bring people together and let them discuss face to face, we also promote the democracy culture. That's what we have been trying to do in Rojava from the beginning. And I would like to give you an example how it happened actually. When the society and the administration, when they work together, what kind of results or outcomes we have. It was a time that we had to, it's about the wheat. We had to collect the product, harvest. And then it was a time that we had so many different fires taking place in the region. So we created committees to protect and prevent any fire. And then for the villages, for the districts, we had these committees for agriculture. They wanted to go, they met with the people and they said, we will organize and we watch the fields. It was done. We can say the incidents, fire incidents, after this cooperation between the people and the committees, the rate of the fires went almost down half. So why? Because it wasn't only left to the administration, it was something carried out jointly. So it was very effective. And after that, then they had also these discussions, the evaluation, because both sides, both the people and also the administration, actually it encouraged and empowered us all together, because it empowered the people taking initiative and taking care of them and themselves, and also the administration also felt very empowered. So it is also, the society is actually very clever. They are intelligent. When we look at these nation states, they see the locals and societies very backwarded, uneducated, or stupid. No, the society is actually very clever. They know what to do, they know how to do. It is the states actually who are crazy or who are not very bright in their thinkings. So the society is very lively and they are very bright. And they can adapt and create solutions, find solutions. So it's very important to bring, have a direct democracy and bring the society, because unless the society gathers and discuss, at the end we will just become a state. In order to prevent it, we have to meet face to face, discuss and decide at the social level. And regarding the social contract, as you mentioned at the beginning, you mentioned 3 cantons back then. It was only the Kurdish regions, and the rest were occupied by ISIS. But now, today, the situation is different. So we need a social contract for also liberated regions. So it will be a contract for entire north and east Syria. And the principles will, the main principles, they will exist, and also we want to discuss and maybe even develop them. We will never change these principles. We will stick with the principles, but we now have to add the recently liberated areas. And there is a commission assigned to work on this. I will also give you an example. What is this also interesting? Maybe it's for the first time in the world, we have a commission who is in charge of updating this social contract. 50% were women, and all the ethnic and religious groups are represented. And then after we finished the work as commission, we also had meetings with the people, with the society. We told them about it. We have dozens and several meetings. So we also collected their ideas, and then now we will gather once again and do the amendments or changes according to the demands and the commentaries from the society. This is the current stage where we are in terms of social contract.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. That's, like I said, I think it is just an extraordinary document, and really puts to shame the documents that the nation states have written. Like, for example, our own Constitution in the United States has no preamble that in any way encompasses the beauty and the majesty of the many, many different people who make up the society here. I'd like to ask you something that I think might be of interest to people who aren't that familiar with Rojava, about the relationship between fostering the full expression of ethnic identity, as you have described it within the democratic and federalist model, and sort of the impetus towards universalism that we all seek in creating harmonious communities. So, for example, Rojava uniquely provides the individual ethnic minorities, Syrian, Arab, and others, to form their own committees and cultural organizations. And for example, a commune co-chair might be made up of an Arab man and a Christian woman. So, but never of two men, and I imagine rarely of two people of the same ethnic background. And in some countries, in particular in the West, in the United States, this kind of desire for the full expression of ethnic rights or religion or even sexual identity has caused fracturing within social movements. So individual groups have become siloed, they've become isolated in a sense in their own efforts to distinguish themselves as unique. So I guess the question that I have, given that this sense of universalism and internationalism had guided the left for many years and now has kind of given way in some quarters to a kind of identity politics that has actually had a divisive impact on communities and certainly within political organizing, is I'd like to know how in Rojava the society helps to empower individual ethnic groups without them becoming imprisoned in their own identities, without their developing a sense of elitism or just, feeling aggrieved, so that the goal of a universality of humankind is also preserved, and that we can have this rich tapestry of individual cultures be celebrated, but also the communal experience, the shared communal experience of our humanity that binds us all together is also cherished as well.
ji bo vê mijarê yani destpêkê ez karim ve bêjim
Regarding this matter, this question, I can say that society actually itself, they recognize and respect each other. The main problem is with the governments, it's the central nation states, because they always want to incite hatred between different groups within the society. If the society really behaved like the state, there will be huge massacres. As I said, the society is clever. They have their mentality and they know that it will not be possible to live together. So we said the Kurds and the Arabs as peoples, they were not hostile against each other. It was a hostility promoted by the nation states. They always wanted to promote Arab nationalism among Arab societies, communities against the Kurds. So, but here in northern eastern Syria, everybody has right to use their language, enjoy their culture, to take part, represent, and enjoy their rights. But it is because when you let them, or they come and they represent themselves, and if everybody also has the same rights to enjoy their language and culture and everything, then there is no point of discussion, because everybody is sharing or enjoying the same rights. And it also facilitate mutual respect and mutual acceptance. We can say it's a democracy, equality, and freedom. It's like a triangle. So they support each other, they empower each other. And it also brings like acceptance and respect, mutual acceptance in Syria, in North and East Syria. So a Kurd wouldn't consider himself better than the Arabs, or Arab wouldn't consider himself better than our Syrians. This is not the culture that we want to have. We are all, we as we are, and we are all equals. In the past, it was a taboo. They wouldn't wear the traditional clothes from each other. Arabs will stick with Arab, Kurds will be Kurds. But today we have dance groups and everybody wears everybody's clothes. Or Arabs would never speak Kurdish because they were kind of undermining, disrespecting Kurdish language, not because they were thought so, but it was they were taught by the regime. It's the language of the inferior. So Arabs wouldn't speak Kurdish. And today we see so many Arabs learning a Kurdish language and so many Kurds learning Syriac, which used to be unbelievable, unthinkable back then. So it's not only because they don't feel themselves like under pressure, or they don't have this complex, I need to speak my language, because they don't feel pressure on their speaking, they're using their mother tongue. So they're not open, and they want to learn other languages. It's also important, we have to, as you mentioned, in our system, the reconciliation is our fundament. Everybody, they should convince themselves, convince each other. It's not only about voting, because if you vote, if it is only voting, it's not everything. You need to convince. If you have an idea, you have to convince the others. So, and co-chair, it always has to be a woman and man, and both of them cannot from the same ethnic or religious background, because it is a place to discuss, to listen to others. So if they have different ideas, and then we have like better discussions with them. So, and the people who are taking part in those councils, they don't also associate or identify themselves with one ethnic co-chair. They all feel like they are a part of it. And the participation of women, it also promoted our democracy. Women, they always have more identities. First, they are women, it's an identity, and also they belong to different religious and ethnic groups. So the participation of women also elevated or promoted our standard of democracy. So women are also playing two different roles in those meetings. So the songs, in cultural aspect, now everybody is singing everybody's songs. Arabs are singing Kurdish songs, Kurds are singing Arabic songs, and now they make video clips together. It's been like 100 years since we had actually a music group composed of different Arabs and Kurds. And today we have several of them. And it also gives us morals. It gives us, we feel encouraged, inspired. Our common identity is the democratic nation, but we also have our own different identity and identities.
I think that's so important, of course, and it's actually very different from what's going on right now in much of certainly of the United States. For example, let's just to give you an example, I would imagine that in Raqqa, perhaps Malajin would have a women's house in Raqqa, would have a more Arab women in the being part of the coordination and governing of a malajin in Raqqa. Maybe in a place like Kobani, there might be more Kurdish women involved, or maybe it's just completely equal. But in the United States, you would find that a woman who is Kurdish might not feel as comfortable going to talk about her problems in a malajin in Raqqa, where there were Arab women in charge. And this is actually a very sad thing, but people are very concerned with having their own spaces. So it's really very opposite from what's going on in Rojava now. And I think that, and that's partly historical, but I think it's really illuminating, therefore, again, for people here in the left to look at the example in Rojava and try and learn from that. Another question that I think that is commonly asked is, how is it that you can begin to do something like democratic confederalism outside of a place like North and East Syria, where the state basically withdrew, beginning with the 2011 civil war and then 2012, and allowed democratic confederalism to take hold. Here, people are very concerned about the power of the state. And I thought maybe you could comment on how some of these ideas were also implemented in Southeast Turkey, where, of course, the state is still very much active. And I'm speaking about before Erdogan really completely tried to crush everything in the communities there, but back when there was still the possibility for people to have democratic confederalist type structures with co-chairs and mayoralties and that sort of thing in Turkey, and whether you would have any advice actually for people who would like to do more of that sort of thing here in the belly of the beast of capitalist modernity.
It's a difficult question to answer. In order to also implement this model in the US, for example. What important is we democratic organizations, we have to start within ourselves. Because at the beginning in Rojava, Kurdistan, only PYD had the co-chairship. But now we see there are several different political parties who are also adopting this, and they also have their co-chairs. So democratic movements, they have to start this from within themselves. They have to start changing themselves first, and then by the time when they develop these relationships between other parties, other organizations, and the society, it will gradually affect as well. In Turkey, they have a very strict centralist structure, but HDP also have co-chairs. Officially, they are not allowed to have co-chairs, but they have their co-chairs in de facto, or at the municipal levels. It's not legal to have co-mayors, but yet they have co-chairs in every municipality that they want. So democratic parties, women organizations, youth organizations, they can play a leading role. We have to start from somewhere. You cannot wait until the state to withdraw, but you have to start within yourselves. And I think we have the potential. We have a good ground to start. Because at the beginning, people say, how can it happen? Co-chairs, if they cannot agree. But today, now we see the advantages of it. In practice, when they see that how it works. So my advice that we have to start from ourselves, and then gradually we can reach out the others. And it's also, we have to start also like as individuals. It is also important to have your mental or your paradigm change, because our brains and our thinking was also designed or shaped with these rules. So we have to start from ourselves as individuals, and then from our organizations, and then we can reach out. And today, so we are like 40%, and we always have the co-chairs. So I think as women in Rojava, we also have our effect on in this revolution.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your very thoughtful contributions to this discussion. I do want to leave open some time the next 20 minutes or so for any additional questions that may come from other participants on the webinar. So please raise your hand or place a question in the chat, and we'll see if we can get that out in front of everybody here. The question is, this is from Liam Noble, where can we go to if we want a pen pal with revolutionaries and leaders in Rojava? So the question is, can the Center for Civil Diplomacy or other contacts in Rojava provide linkages to people that may want to communicate with leaders in Rojava directly?
And actually create a coordination, like a civil diplomacy center.
As far as this regard, of course,
it.
the Diplomacy Center can organize things, can act as a coordination for writing letters and things.
I have a comment, actually, and it struck me very importantly when Debbie had compared the fragmentation that is occurring in the West and in the United States in particular with identitarian politics, and the ways in which gender, ethnic, religious identities and the groups that they form, instead of collaborating and seeking towards some kind of larger unity between them, are in fact fragmenting that social unity and are often becoming very antagonistic and aggressive between each other. And the response by you, Fawza, outlining how the social contract in Rojava establishes a foundation of equal rights and respect for different identities in Rojava at the outset. And it struck me that perhaps this is a fundamental difference, that the difference being that the identity politics in the United States, so many of the issues are driven by an existing sense of inequality, an existing sense of grievance, an existing sense of injustice, and the sense of being ignored or unequally treated, which fuels this kind of aggression, this kind of sense of we have to build a wall, in a sense, around ourselves and fight for our rights because of this pre-existing sense of grievance and injustice. And I wonder if it would have been different if the starting ground and if the foundation was already an established acceptance of freedom and equality for all these identities, and whether that fragmentation therefore would not have happened. I wouldn't mind actually a reflection from both of you on that.
يعني as green دبينم من داخل.
For instance, whenever rights are taken away, situations like this can occur. And this is something related to the politics of the state. The politics of the state is what causes situations like this to occur. The injustice, as well as the intentional kinds of political games that the state creates. Some states intentionally create these contradictions because they create their own ideology of the state in their own service. yani a racist ideology, an ideology of power. And this is what we can see as the primary reason that causes things like this. If we can say that justice exists, practically in the life, if there is not a systematically developed politics, if there's not a systematically developed politics, then there will not be such a separation of society from itself. And we can say in general that the injustice creates situations like this.
Debbie, what's your take on that?
Well, I completely agree with Fawza. I mean, I think that the sad part is that just as Fawza said, the state is invested precisely in maintaining this sense of division and grievance, that what is sad is that we, in a certain sense, fall into that trap. And in my mind, it would be nice to see people think through with a more holistic approach to what a radical politics should be. And of course, Fawza touched on many important things in her talk, but one of them, for example, was the equality of unequals. Somehow this idea that we have drummed into us that everybody has to be exactly equal, when in fact, you always have to account for disability, for age, for all kinds of other social strata, that we need a more flexible understanding of what it means to create community, and that we need to also focus on something that I think is really important, that I didn't have a chance to ask Fawza about, but the whole role of education, because it's these incredible academies, the universities in Rojava, forums like this, but this massive effort that even includes door-to-door education of the population, that I think can really make a difference here. So I'm going to end it there because I see there are other questions and I'd really like to give other people a chance.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. So we have two more questions, and I'd like to make these the last two questions because we're running into the time frame for our talk. The first is to Fawza. Is there any experience sharing or dialogue and similar experiences with self-governance ongoing in other regions in Syria outside northeast Syria? So that's the first question. And the second question is a personal question to Fawza. When did you become aware of Kurdish issues? And Fawza, did you grow up in a patriotic family? And how was your own development evolved into a revolutionary activist woman?
In Sweden.
That's
also a city of Syria. And we tried to create works in these areas. However, the Syrian regime created lots of difficulties for these works. And so the experience of northeastern Syria, is not applying to all of Syria, for instance. Even though we have tried to go to these other places and tried to create these relationships, we want to create the experience that we have in northeastern Syria. We want to go to other places in Syria. However, the current government in Damascus is creating lots of problems for this. They don't want it to go to any other cities. They don't want it to have an effect on these other places. Sometimes we want to create meetings and conferences, and we invite them. And the Syrian government creates lots of difficulties for this. Doesn't allow people from other cities to come to our areas as well. And for the last question, for the personal question, our family, you could say, was in some ways patriotic. However, you can say that our society in general was very feudal, was kind of like a sexist society. And to become a revolutionary as a woman in our society was something very difficult. You have to consider everything first. You have to consider all of the difficulties. And upon considering all these difficulties, make your decision. Regardless, being a revolutionary in general is difficult, but for a woman was even harder. And as Kurdish women, we're oppressed twice. We're oppressed as Kurds, we're oppressed as women. As people of the Middle East, we're oppressed. And there's knots inside of knots of oppression. There's contradictions of the nation, and there's also gender contradictions of the woman, which led me to create this decision to become a revolutionary. And also, I saw that all other methods did not bring about a solution. As a people, we have always been faced with many difficulties, and also as a woman. I saw how the women around me were living. I saw all the violence against women, especially in our society. And so there's two solutions in front of us. Either I accept the situation of my mother and my sister and my neighbor, and I will live like them, or I will make the decision to become a revolutionary. And I made the decision to become a revolutionary. And undoubtedly, I'm very happy to have made that decision. And we're very happy to be able to open the way to a new kind of life in front of millions of women. We won't put women between death and the family anymore. That's something that's very important, not only for Kurdish women, but also for Arab women, Syrian women. There's a very new free road that has been opened. And that is our struggle, is to open up roads like this. Undoubtedly, I'm very proud that I chose this path. And every day we see its results. And I want to say something to you. As soon as Raqqa was liberated from ISIS, all of the women there were completely covered in black from head to toe. But ISIS didn't also cover them physically in black. They covered their lives in black. They covered their brains in black. But now when you look at Raqqa, it's like a rainbow. There's so many colors. And that was caused by our revolution that gave such color to Raqqa. And now in Raqqa, there's the Habsarok system. There's the Malay Jinn. There's the autonomous administrations there. The places that ISIS was controlling, now there's women's organizations, such as the Zanubi organization of the women of the Middle East, a very powerful organization. And that gives us a lot of happiness for the women of the entire area. And I'm very happy that I made the decision to become a revolutionary.
Well, we're very happy too.
And John, on that subject, before we close, could I just mention that to people here, for those of you who are here and appreciate what's going on in Rojava, it's never been more important to show your solidarity. Right now, as we speak here, the United States is actively considering whether to send F-16 fighter jets and their parts to Turkey, which has been something that successfully has been blocked by Bob Menendez of New Jersey, the senator who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, but which Biden is pushing for very, very hard. So I just wanted to say, just as Fawza mentioned, the martyrs who have been killed recently by yesterday and in the last few weeks by drone strikes, where they are really, Turkey is really, really going after everybody they can using drones. They would also very much like to up their game with these F-16 fighter jets. And it's never been more important than now for people to make their views known. And as somebody who myself worked as a press secretary for a congressperson, I can tell you that when you call, they listen. So I would just like to take a moment to urge everybody to go to our defendrojava.org website, and there we have scripts, we have telephone numbers, and it would really be very, very meaningful, because just as that beautiful social contract that I read parts from in the beginning show, 13,000 people gave their lives to defend that social contract, and many, many thousands more were maimed. And I think it's something that all of us can agree we really must support. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you so much, Fawza, for your very thoughtful, very touching, and very profound reflection on this subject. I too want to just offer my gratitude for all the work that the Center for Civil Diplomacy is doing in Rojava and helping us put this series together. It's extraordinarily important to try and get this message and this vision constantly in front of people that are committed and interested on these issues. We're going to close down in a couple of minutes. I want to repeat that this lecture, as all the other ones, are going to be recorded and made publicly available to people that want to view them later. I would very much like to ask Kinching if the comments in the chat box can all be saved so that we can archive them. I'm not sure that they have been saved in the past. So if you can do whatever you can to make sure that all the comments in the chat are saved for our reference, that would be a real help. And finally, one of our participants requested a contact that they could use or others can use at the Center for Civil Diplomacy in Rojava if they want to communicate with them and interact with them. So a contact person in the center would be, and the contact info and so on would be most helpful. So thank you, everybody, for taking part. It's been a wonderful session.